Survivors, if you're listening, know this. Our world is unraveling faster than anyone could have imagined. The towns you once knew, they're disappearing. Entire communities, gone without a trace. Not destroyed, not abandoned. Just emptiness, where homes, lives, and memories once stood. It feels different tonight. The air is heavy, charged with something I can't explain. It's as if the earth itself knows what's coming, a weight pressing down on everything. If you're still out there, I need you to stay with me. For those joining us for the first time, I'm Steve John, and this is Station Alpha. I'm here to be your voice in the void, to tell you the truth about what's happening to our world. This broadcast is for you, the survivors, the fighters, the ones who refuse to give up. Let me bring you up to speed. The world as we knew it is gone, reduced to ash and ruin. It started with us, our own hands. The nuclear war tore through everything, obliterating cities, poisoning the air, and turning the earth into an unrecognizable wasteland. The places we called home, the places we built with hope and dreams, they're uninhabitable now, buried under layers of fallout. The bombs didn't just destroy, they erased. Entire cities turned to shadows etched onto walls, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. The rivers, the lakes, the forests, all of it, lifeless. Survivors scattered, trying to piece together what remained. But that was only the beginning. When the first alien ships appeared, we thought maybe, just maybe, they had come to help, to save what little was left of our dying world. But we were wrong. So terribly wrong. Their presence wasn't an answer to our prayers. It was a nightmare beyond anything we could have imagined. Massive ships hung silently in the sky, watching, waiting. Their technology was far beyond our understanding. Weapons that didn't destroy but erased. Lights that swept across the land, leaving nothing behind. No rubble, no bodies, no signs of life. Paranoia spread quickly. Survivors turned on each other, afraid that any misstep might draw the attention of the ships. People became just as much of a threat as the aliens themselves. Trust became a luxury no one could afford. But tonight, I'm not here to talk about the bombs or the ships. Tonight, I'm here to talk about something else. Something that doesn't make sense, even in this fractured world. Survivors have been reporting strange phenomena. Towns vanishing overnight. Entire communities wiped clean, as if they never existed. No ruins, no debris, just smooth, cold ground where buildings once stood. People go to sleep surrounded by the familiar sounds of life. Laughter, voices, footsteps, and wake up to nothing. Imagine that for a moment. The place you call home. The people you care about. Gone. No signs of struggle, no explanation. Just an emptiness so complete, it feels like the world itself is trying to erase you. I've spoken to survivors who have experienced it firsthand. They describe the air in those places as heavy, metallic, sticking to your throat like ash. The ground where houses once stood feels wrong. Cold and unnaturally smooth, polished by something beyond comprehension. Some survivors say they've heard whispers in these places, faint voices calling their names, pulling them deeper into the silence. The report started slowly. A small settlement here, a village there. People assumed it was the aliens testing some new weapon, but now it's spreading. Entire regions are being wiped clean. There's no pattern, no logic. Some towns vanish entirely, while others leave behind fragments. A single street, a lone building, as if mocking the idea of permanence. Survivors searching for loved ones find nothing but empty spaces and silence. One man told me about returning to his home after weeks of scavenging, only to find that it was gone. The street he'd walked every day, the house he'd built with his own hands, the people he'd shared his life with, all of it erased. The only thing left was his son's toy car, lying untouched in the dirt. This isn't destruction. It's something else, something calculated, precise. I don't know what's causing it. Maybe it's them, the aliens. Maybe it's something buried deep within the Earth itself. Something we unleashed with our bombs. Or maybe it's us. I've heard whispers about survivors who've gone too far, who've tried to uncover the truth about these vanishings. They don't come back. The few who do, they're not the same. Their eyes are hollow, their words fragmented, as if they've seen something their minds can't process. They speak of lights that erase memory, shadows that move when nothing else does, and a sound, low, resonant, a hum that gets under your skin and stays there. Survivors, I don't have the answers. I wish I did. All I know is this. The vanishings are real and they're getting closer. If you're out there, if you're listening, stay alert. Pay attention to the signs. If you feel the air grow heavy, if you hear whispers in the silence, if the ground beneath your feet feels colder than it should, run. The towns we've lost, the people we've lost, they're not coming back. But you, whoever you are, wherever you are, you still have a chance. Stay with me. Tonight, we'll dive deeper into these reports. I'll share the stories survivors have told me, stories that will chill you to your core, stories that might just help you understand what's happening. The world is unraveling. Survivors, piece by piece, it's slipping away. But as long as we're still here, as long as we're still breathing, we can fight to hold on to what's left. The world we once knew no longer exists. What remains is a shadow, a hollow version of the vibrant, thriving planet we called home. The skies are a constant gray, choked with ash and radioactive clouds. They stretch endlessly above, blotting out the sun, turning day into a perpetual twilight. There's no warmth anymore. The sun's light, faint as it is, feels weak and distant, like a memory fading with each passing day. The air is thick, almost suffocating, heavy, with the scent of burning metal and decay. It clings to your skin, settles in your throat, and leaves behind a bitter aftertaste that no amount of water, or what passes for water, can wash away. The ash in the atmosphere doesn't fall, it lingers, creating an oppressive ceiling that looms over everything. Breathing is a challenge, even for those who found makeshift filters or cloth masks. The air has become the enemy just as much as the world itself. Rivers, once the lifeblood of our planet, are now ribbons of death cutting through the wasteland. Their waters are poisoned, their surfaces coated with a slick, oily sheen that shimmers faintly in the dim light. The fish that once thrived there now float lifelessly, their bloated bodies bobbing against the current. Their eyes, wide and unseeing, seem to accuse the world for what it's become. Even the sound of running water has changed. It no longer soothes. It taunts. A cruel reminder of what we've lost. The forests, once lush and teeming with life, are now skeletal remains. The trees stand like blackened sentinels, their branches bare and twisted. Walking through them feels like walking through a graveyard, each step crunching on charred debris. And then there are the new growths. The mutated plants that seem to defy the natural order. Their leaves are unnaturally large, their stems glowing with an eerie bioluminescence. They emit a soft hum, a sound that vibrates in your chest and makes your teeth ache. No one dares touch them. The stories of what happens to those who do are enough to keep even the most desperate survivors away. Beneath our feet, the ground tells its own story. The soil is cracked and dry, incapable of sustaining life. Yet, in certain areas, fissures have begun to appear. They glow faintly, pulsating like the heartbeat of some slumbering giant. The light they emit is cold, sterile, and unsettling, casting shadows that twist and writhe unnaturally. Survivors who've stumbled across these fissures report feeling an overwhelming sense of unease, as if they're being watched. The hum they produce is low and constant, more felt than heard, and it lingers in your mind long after you've walked away. And then there are the lights in the sky. They move with an intelligence that we can't understand, weaving patterns that seem deliberate, purposeful. Sometimes they appear out of nowhere, casting the land in a pale white glow that feels more clinical than natural. Survivors who've been caught under their gaze describe an oppressive silence, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Birds, animals, everything goes still. The lights linger for minutes, sometimes hours, before vanishing without a trace. And when they're gone, they leave behind an emptiness that's impossible to describe. Humanity, what's left of it, clings to existence like a thread fraying at the edges. Survivors roam the wasteland, their faces gaunt and their eyes hollow. They speak in hushed tones, as if afraid the world might overhear. Makeshift shelters dot the landscape, patchwork tents made from tarps and scavenged materials, precarious lean-tos nestled under crumbling overpasses. But these shelters are temporary at best, collapsing under the weight of ash-laden winds. No one stays in one place for long. Movement is survival. Food is a constant struggle. The canned goods that once sustained us are running out, their metal shells rusted and corroded. Hunting is no longer an option. The animals that wander this wasteland are no longer the creatures we once knew. They're twisted, their forms grotesque, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Their flesh is as toxic as the air, their very presence a reminder of how deeply the world has changed. Foraging offers little solace. The plants that grow in the soil are dangerous, their bright colors and sharp thorns, warning of the poison they carry. And now, as if all of this weren't enough, there's the phenomenon of vanishing towns. At first, the report seemed isolated, scattered whispers among survivors, a small village here, a settlement there, disappearing overnight without explanation. But now, it's undeniable. Entire communities are being wiped from existence, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. It doesn't make sense. Nothing in this world does anymore. But this is something else. Survivors tell stories that are hard to believe, yet impossible to ignore. A man returns to his home after days of scavenging, only to find that it's gone. Not destroyed, gone. The street he grew up on, the house he built with his own hands, the neighbors who shared his meals and his laughter, all of it erased. The ground where it once stood is smooth and cold, as if polished by some invisible force. He found nothing but his son's toy truck, lying untouched in the dirt, a cruel reminder of what had been taken. Others speak of waking up to find their towns missing. They go to bed surrounded by the familiar sounds of life, voices, footsteps, the hum of generators, and wake to silence. No people, no buildings. Just an emptiness so profound it feels like the earth itself has forgotten them. They describe the air in these places as heavy, metallic, sticking in their throats and making their skin crawl. Some claim to hear whispers, faint and indistinct, as if the town is still there, just beyond their reach. One survivor told me about seeing it happen. He was on a hill overlooking a neighboring town when it vanished. It was like a wave of light, he said. It swept across the town, and when it was gone, so was everything else. No noise, no debris, just nothing. And then there are the shadows. Survivors describe seeing them in the corners of their vision, flickering and moving when nothing else does. Some say they've felt a presence, something watching, something waiting. One woman told me she heard her husband's voice in the silence calling her name. But when she turned, there was nothing there. The vanishings are spreading. Larger towns, even small cities, are being erased. Survivors are afraid to sleep, afraid they'll wake up to find themselves alone in an empty world. They share stories of people disappearing right before their eyes, families torn apart in an instant, What's causing this? Theories abound, but no one knows for sure. Some believe it's the aliens testing a new weapon or reshaping the planet for their own purposes. Others think it's the Earth itself, reacting to the destruction we've wrought. And then there are those who whisper of something else. Something older and deeper. Something we've disturbed but don't understand. Whatever the cause. The vanishings are a grim reminder of how fragile our existence has become. Survivors, if you're listening, pay attention to the signs. If you see the lights, if you hear the whispers, if the air feels heavy and wrong, leave. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. The world is unraveling, piece by piece. But as long as we're here, as long as we can tell our stories, there's still something worth fighting for. I bring you stories from the voices of those who endure. Each tale is a thread in the fabric of what's left of humanity, a fabric that frays more with each passing day. These stories are not just words. They're reminders of what we fight for, what we've lost, and the resilience that refuses to die. The first story is one of a desperate father, a man who returned to the place he called home, only to find it erased from existence. He reached out to me a few days ago, his voice cracking with emotion as he recounted what had happened. His town, a small community tucked into the foothills, had been his sanctuary. It was where his family had lived, where his son's laughter had filled the air, where life had felt, even briefly, safe. I went out to scavenge, he said, his words trembling with the weight of regret. We were running low on food, and I told them I'd be back by sundown. My wife, she didn't want me to go. She said we'd manage, that we didn't need to risk it. But I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. When he returned, the town was gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned. Gone. There was nothing left, he whispered. No houses, no streets, no people. Just this emptiness. The ground was smooth, cold, like it had never been touched. It didn't make sense. How can a place just vanish? He spent hours walking through the empty space, calling out for his wife, his son. His voice echoed back to him, mocking his hope. And then he found it, his son's toy car, sitting in the dirt, the little red car with the scratched paint, the one his boy had carried everywhere. It was the only thing left, untouched by whatever had erased everything else. I fell to my knees, he said, his voice breaking. I held that car in my hands, and it felt like the world had ended all over again. My boy, he's gone. They're all gone. He doesn't know why he survived when they didn't. He doesn't know what took them, or if they're still out there somewhere. All he knows is the emptiness, the silence that follows him wherever he goes. I keep hearing it, he said. Laughter, faint, distant, like it's coming from nowhere. It sounds like him, but it can't be. It can't. His story is one of unbearable loss, a reminder of how fragile everything has become. But it's also a story of love. Love so strong it endures, even in the face of the void. The next story comes from a young girl, barely old enough to understand the world she's been thrust into. She was found wandering alone through the wasteland, clutching a torn blanket and speaking in hushed tones about what had happened. She told me her name was Lila. Her town had disappeared overnight, leaving her the only one behind. I don't know why it happened, she said, her voice soft and trembling. I went to bed, and everything was normal. Mom kissed me goodnight. Dad said he'd fix my music box in the morning. But when I woke up, they were gone. The house was gone. Everything was gone. She wandered through the empty space, calling for her parents, her friends, anyone who might hear her. But there was no answer, just the smooth, cold ground and the metallic tang in the air. I started hearing whispers, she said, her wide eyes filled with fear. They were saying my name. At first I thought it was Mom or Dad, but it wasn't. It didn't sound like them. The whispers led her deeper into the emptiness, pulling her towards something she couldn't see. She walked for what felt like hours, drawn by the voices, until she came across a single intact chair sitting in the middle of the void. There was a doll on the chair, she said, clutching her blanket tighter. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was smiling at me, like it knew something I didn't. Lila ran. She doesn't remember how far or how long, only that she didn't stop until the whispers were gone. Now, she wanders, searching for others like her, hoping to find answers, or at least someone who can tell her she's not crazy. The next story comes from a group of survivors who witnessed a neighboring town vanish in the blink of an eye. They lived in a small village on the edge of a forest, close enough to see the lights of the neighboring town at night. The two communities had shared resources, supported each other in times of need, but one night, the lights went out. We were sitting around the fire, one of them told me, when we saw it. A light, bright and white, sweeping across the town. It didn't make any noise, it just moved, like it was searching for something. The light engulfed the town, and when it faded, the town was gone. We didn't know what to do, he said. We just sat there, staring at the empty space where the town used to be. It didn't make sense. How can a whole town just disappear? Another member of the group claims to have seen something else, shadows moving within the light, humanoid figures that flickered and shifted like static. They weren't people, she said, her voice low and shaky. They looked like people, but they weren't. And just before the light faded, they turned and looked at us. The group fled that night, abandoning their village out of fear that they might be next. They've been moving ever since, never staying in one place for too long. These stories are hard to hear, but they're harder to live. They're stories of loss, of fear, of a world that no longer makes sense. But they're also stories of survival, of people who refuse to give up, even when everything around them is falling apart. The emotional toll on these survivors is immeasurable. They speak of nightmares, of waking up screaming, of hearing the voices of loved ones in the silence. They've lost everything, homes, families, the simple comforts of life, and yet they keep going. Food and water are constant struggles. Many have gone days without eating, their bodies weak and trembling from hunger. Water is scarce, and what little they find is often contaminated, forcing them to choose between dehydration and poisoning. But perhaps the greatest toll is the loss of hope. Survivors speak of feeling like ghosts, wandering a world that no longer recognizes them. They question why they're still here when so many others are gone. They wonder if it's worth it, if there's anything left to fight for. And yet they do fight. They share their stories, their fears, their dreams. They remind each other and themselves that they're not alone. Survivors, if you're listening, know this. Your stories matter. Your pain, your fear, your hope. It all matters. As long as we're here to tell them, the world hasn't truly ended. Survivors, the signs are clearer now. What was once a series of strange occurrences has become a full-scale crisis. The aliens, the distortions in time, the artifacts, these aren't isolated events. They are part of something much larger, something we don't yet understand. And with each passing day, we're losing our grip on what little is left of the world we once knew. The alien presence is becoming harder to ignore. It's not just about sightings anymore. Survivors are beginning to feel it, a kind of oppression, a weight in the air that presses down on them, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. It's as though the aliens are no longer just watching. They're influencing everything, bending reality itself. Survivors near the vanished towns report seeing more of the humanoid figures, These eerie silhouettes that dissolve into nothing when approached. But now, they aren't just standing still, observing from the distance. They're moving closer, following survivors as they try to flee the devastation. It's as if they're toying with us, studying us like insects under a magnifying glass. One man shared a chilling account with me. He said he and his group had been walking through what used to be a small town when they saw the figures again. This time, they weren't standing still. They were moving with us, always just out of sight, like they knew where we were going before we did, he said. We tried to outrun them, but they were everywhere, every corner, every alley, always in the periphery of our vision. We'd hear their footsteps, but when we turned, nothing was there. Then, one by one, we started feeling them right behind us, breathing down our necks, but we couldn't hear them move. The fear they instilled wasn't just in their presence, it was in the way they seemed to manipulate the world around them. These figures didn't walk on the ground. They glided like shadows that didn't belong to anything real. The man said he didn't know how long they'd been followed, but when he tried to turn around and confront one of them, it vanished into a cloud of dust. And in that dust, I could see the outline of something not quite human, not quite alive, he said. It was as if it was made of smoke. These figures aren't just a curiosity, they're a warning, a sign that something darker is moving closer. But it's not just the aliens that survivors have to fear. The disturbances in time are growing stronger. The gaps between moments are widening, and the effects are becoming more severe. Survivors report entire days lost without explanation. It's as if time itself is warping, slipping away, like sand through an hourglass, with no way to stop it. A man who survived a time distortion told me, I was driving along the highway, trying to get to a safer location, when I realized something wasn't right. The road ahead was clear, but when I checked my gas gauge, it was empty. I hadn't stopped for fuel in hours. The strangest part, though, was that I had already passed a town, without realizing it. I was 300 miles further than I should have been. But the strangest thing? There was no sign of the town, no memory of passing it, and I had no idea where I had been for the last few hours. This is not just an issue of memory loss. It's an entire collapse of time. Survivors are losing not just hours or days, but entire pieces of their existence. It's as if the very fabric of reality is starting to tear apart, and we are left scrambling to make sense of it. But the alien sightings are escalating too. They're becoming more frequent, more aggressive. Survivors who venture too close to the towns that have vanished report seeing strange lights in the sky, moving erratically as if they're looking for something or someone. Some have seen these lights following them, darting behind them when they turn a corner, disappearing when they look up. One survivor described it as being hunted by the very sky itself. The artifacts are becoming a focal point. Wherever towns vanish, these strange metallic objects are found. Objects that hum with energy, emitting a low, constant vibration that rattles the bones. One survivor who found an artifact described it as alive, saying it felt like it was trying to communicate with him, though he couldn't understand the message. It was like the air around me was bending, he said. I could feel the ground shift under my feet, like I wasn't standing on solid ground anymore. And when I touched it, it was warm, but not in a way that was natural. Like it was pulling something from me, taking my energy. These artifacts are growing in frequency, and survivors have begun to worry that they're not just relics of an alien presence. They might be part of the reason the towns are disappearing in the first place. The survivors who have encountered them feel a sense of foreboding. They say that the closer they get, the more they feel like something is being watched, like the earth itself is holding its breath. And just when you think things can't get worse, the human conflict begins to escalate. The gangs are getting more organized. Where once there were small, isolated groups scavenging to survive, now there are large factions, armed and ruthless, willing to do anything to take control of the limited resources that remain. They target the vulnerable, those who have no means to defend themselves, and take what they can, leaving only destruction in their wake. One group of survivors I spoke to described their run-in with a gang. "We were just looking for food," they said. "We found a stash in an old factory. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us going for a few days. But before we could leave, they showed up. They took everything. They said it was their territory now. They didn't care who we were. They didn't care if we had kids. They just took what they wanted, and when we tried to fight back, they killed one of us. Violence is everywhere. Survivors who used to band together now look at each other with suspicion, wondering who might betray them for a handful of food or a drink of water. The distrust is palpable. It's as though the threat of the aliens isn't enough to unite us anymore. Instead, we're turning on each other, fractured and broken by our own fears. They say we're all in this together," another survivor told me. "But when you're starving, when you're thirsty, when you have nothing left to give, you start looking at people differently. You start thinking that maybe, just maybe, they're the reason you're not going to make it. The paranoia is spreading. People are starting to blame each other for attracting alien attention. They say the aliens are drawn to survivors who act strangely or gather in groups. No one knows for sure, but the rumors are enough to divide entire communities. Survivors are turning on each other, afraid that one person's actions might lead to the destruction of them all. As if the aliens weren't enough, as if the time distortions weren't unsettling enough, we now face the collapse of our own humanity. The world is slipping through our fingers, and with each passing day, the chances of survival grow slimmer. The question that haunts me, that haunts all of us, is simple. How much longer can we keep this up? How long before we too vanish, lost to the ash and the shadows? Survivors, if you're listening, know this. The world is changing in ways we don't understand, and time is running out. But we're still here. We're still fighting, and as long as we're here, there's still hope. The air was thick with static, crackling through the radio frequencies as I sat there, my hands trembling slightly as I adjusted the dials. Another long night alone in the station, just me and the silence. That was until the broadcast began, slicing through the void like a razor, clear and chilling in its delivery. It wasn't like the usual alien transmissions we've all grown accustomed to, the strange bursts of static and incoherent signals. No, this was different. This broadcast was deliberate, calculated, and spoke directly to us. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I thought maybe the isolation was getting to me, or that some piece of my equipment had malfunctioned. But, as the message continued, I realized that it was real. Too real. Someone, or something, was out there, and they wanted us to hear this. The voice was distorted, a deep and mechanical sound, as if it had been processed through layers of filters. But underneath the static, there was a clarity, a tone that was unmistakably urgent. It spoke of a construct, a massive alien structure believed to be the source of the disturbances we've all been experiencing, the time distortions, the vanishings, the rifts in reality. The voice warned us about an impending event, something big, something catastrophic. It spoke of an alien plan to alter reality itself. A terrifying thought when you realize what we've already witnessed. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about fighting to keep our very existence intact. The construct is awakening, the voice said, its words slow, deliberate. The boundaries between worlds are weakening. You cannot ignore this. It must be stopped, or all will be lost. I listened, glued to the radio, my heart pounding in my chest. The construct. What did that mean? What was this alien technology capable of? And why was it suddenly awakening now, when the world was already on the brink of collapse? I had been aware of the rumors, the reports from survivors who had seen strange lights near the ruined cities, heard whispers of a massive structure in the distance, but hearing it confirmed, hearing it spoken so openly, made it all feel far more real, far more dangerous. The voice on the broadcast didn't just speak of the construct, it spoke of an inevitable event. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all connected to it, as if we were being drawn toward it like moths to a flame. I broadcasted the message, as I've done countless times before, hoping it would reach any other survivors still out there. We had to prepare. We had to act before it was too late. The following days were tense, filled with whispers and rumors. Survivors from nearby regions began sharing stories of their own encounters, visions of strange lights, the sensation of time slipping away, and a growing sense that something far greater than the aliens was at work. There was a common thread between all these accounts: the construct. The survivors knew they couldn't wait any longer. They needed answers. They needed to find this structure and learn what it was capable of before it could reach its full potential. And so, a group of brave souls, myself included, set out, hoping to get closer, to investigate, to understand. We didn't know what we'd find, but the closer we got to the area where the construct was said to be, the more the air seemed to thrum with energy. The ground beneath our feet vibrated in a way I can't describe, like the earth itself was alive, shifting and responding to something unseen. As we approached the site, the sky above us began to flicker with unnatural light. The world around us seemed to warp, like a heat mirage on a scorching day. But there was no heat, just a disorienting distortion. It was as if reality itself was being twisted by the power of whatever this construct was. And then we saw it. The structure loomed on the horizon, massive and incomprehensible. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before, nor had any survivor I spoke with. Towering spires reached skyward, their surfaces smooth and metallic, but their forms were constantly shifting, as if they were not entirely solid, not entirely bound to our world. They shimmered like they existed between dimensions. We were close enough now that the hum from the construct was unmistakable. It pulsed through the air, reverberating in our bones like a living thing. And as we moved forward, our minds began to feel it. The pull. The closer we got, the more we felt like we were being drawn into it, into its orbit, like gravity itself had changed. We began to feel disoriented, the ground shifting beneath us, time slipping away once again. Then everything changed. Out of nowhere, a sharp noise pierced the air, loud enough to rattle our skulls. We froze, and then we saw them. The rogue alien forces, the ones we'd heard about in whispers, had arrived. They came in a wave, descending from above like dark clouds, their forms humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their eyes glowed a sickly green, their movements swift and deliberate. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. We could see it in their actions, the way they surrounded us, cutting off any escape. The first of us fell quickly. One of the survivors, a man named Isaac, didn't even have a chance to pull his weapon before he was struck down. The aliens moved with precision, their forms shifting and dissolving like smoke when we tried to fight back. They were like shadows in the light, always one step ahead, one move ahead. The remaining survivors scattered, some running for cover, others fighting back with everything they had. It was chaos. Gunshots rang out, but they seemed useless against these beings, who were almost untouchable, dissolving into thin air as soon as we thought we had them cornered. We were outmatched. The aliens were everywhere, moving in and out of sight with unnatural speed, and we were helpless against their attacks. Each time we tried to regroup, they'd disappear again, only to reappear from an entirely different angle. Our weapons seemed to have no effect on them. We couldn't even get close enough to land a hit before they'd vanish. By the time I realized what was happening, what we were up against, it was too late. The group had scattered and the construct was right there in front of us, its hum growing louder, pulling us toward it with an unseen force. We had no choice but to retreat. We'd come so close to answers, to unraveling the truth of what had caused this world to unravel. But the cost of that knowledge was too high. The alien forces were too powerful, too merciless. We didn't know how long we had before they would come for us again. Before the construct would activate, if it hadn't already. All we knew was that time was running out. The survivors who made it back were shaken, broken by what they had seen. Some spoke in hushed tones, others refused to speak at all. But the message was clear. Whatever the aliens were planning, it was bigger than we could comprehend. And the construct, whatever it truly was the key to everything. As I sit here now, alone in the station, I hear that same hum in the distance, faint but unmistakable. The construct is waking up, and with it, so are the forces that would see us erased from existence. Survivors, if you're hearing this, know this. The time for waiting is over. The answers we've been searching for are just within our grasp, but so are the consequences. What happens next is in our hands, but can we stop it before it's too late? Or will we too be swept away like the towns that have vanished? The hum from the construct, that eerie vibration in the air, was louder now, pulsing through the very ground I stood on. I could feel it in my bones, like something ancient, something far beyond our understanding, was stirring. The sky above me, once dim with the ash of the world, was now tinged with an unnatural glow. Faint but steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the atmosphere. The tension was unbearable, thick enough to taste. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something far worse than anything we'd already endured. I sat in the station, alone in the dark, the lights flickering above me as I adjusted the dials on the radio. My fingers moved with a sense of urgency I couldn't explain, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. And that's when I saw it. Lights, strange lights in the distance, moving slowly but unmistakably closer. At first I thought they were just a trick of the eyes, a result of fatigue or the disorienting effects of the construct's hum. But no, these were real. These lights were coming toward me. They weren't like the usual alien lights I'd grown used to. Those eerie orbs that hovered in the sky, casting an otherworldly glow over the ruins. These lights were different, brighter, more focused, and they moved with purpose. They weren't floating aimlessly. They were coming straight for me. I couldn't breathe. I watched in silence, my eyes fixed on the horizon, my mind racing with every possible explanation, and none that made sense. There was no way they could be from the ships. They were too close, too fast. Were they searching for something, or had they already found it? Were they coming for me? I turned to the radio, hoping against hope that I could somehow send a message to anyone out there, any survivor who might still be listening. My fingers trembled as I pressed the transmission button. Survivors, if you're listening, this is Station Alpha. I don't know what's coming, but it's here. The lights, they're moving toward me. I can feel it in the air. Whatever it is, it's not like anything we've faced before. I paused, my mind racing with fear. Could I be hearing this right? Could it be a survivor? A call for help? A distress signal? My last hope? Or was it the aliens, finally breaking through the last remaining barriers? Before I could act, the static returned, louder than ever before. It washed over the radio, drowning out my voice, then suddenly cut off. For a moment, there was silence. Complete and absolute silence. I waited, holding my breath. My hand hovered over the transmission dial, my heart pounding in my chest. Had the broadcast been cut off? Or was this something else? Something far worse? Then I heard it. A sound. Deep, resonant, almost mechanical, but unmistakable. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't a voice, but a sound that seemed to slice through the air, cutting through the static like a knife. It was as though something was trying to force its way through, something alien. For a moment, I thought I was losing my mind, my thoughts spinning out of control. Was it a new alien transmission? Or was it something else? A survivor, maybe? A final desperate cry for help, only to be drowned out by the interference from the construct's hum? I had no way of knowing, no way of understanding what this was. The transmission crackled again, and I tried to adjust the dial, searching for a signal. "This is Station Alpha." I tried again, my voice trembling. "If you can hear me, if you are out there, please respond. We need to know what's happening. The lights are getting closer. I need to know what this is." I could hear my voice faltering, my desperation, creeping into every word. The hum in the air seemed to grow louder, matching the pounding in my chest. The strange lights were drawing nearer, casting an eerie glow across the station, and my thoughts were racing faster than I could keep up. Then the transmission stopped again. The hum was replaced with something different. A faint, low buzzing sound followed by another sharp, distorted noise. It sounded like a voice, but not one I could recognize. The words were garbled, fragmented, coming through in bursts like a broken transmission. "Survivors, we help," and then nothing. The signal was gone. I sat there in the darkness, my breath coming in shallow gasps, staring at the flickering lights above me. The distant glow of the approaching lights still visible through the broken windows. Was it a survivor? Were they trying to reach me? Or had it been the aliens, speaking through the interference, reaching out in their own way? Either way, the message was clear, the danger was real, and it was drawing nearer. The unknown was closing in. And then, the strangest thing happened. The radio crackled once more, and a new voice, calm but filled with despair, spoke. It was me, or rather, my voice, but distorted and warped, as though it was coming from a different place, a different time. I couldn't understand it, couldn't explain it. It wasn't possible. "Survivors, the night feels darker than ever. Something's coming." My voice echoed, distorted, like a warning. "Stay hidden. Stay alive. I'll be back, if I can." I stood frozen, staring at the radio in disbelief. What was happening? Was I hearing myself from the future? Had I already made this broadcast, only to be trapped in this loop? Or was this something else entirely, something beyond comprehension? The hum in the air grew louder still, the lights outside flickering with an unnatural intensity. It was as if the very fabric of time and space was beginning to break down around me. I didn't know how much longer I could stay in this station. Alone and helpless, waiting for whatever was coming. Then a low, mechanical whirring sound filled the room, followed by the unmistakable thud of heavy footsteps outside. The lights outside flickered once more, casting a pale, sickly glow on the walls of the station. I knew the time had come. Whatever it was, alien or otherwise, it was here. I stood up slowly, my heart racing. There was no more time for waiting. There was no more time for hoping. The night had grown darker than ever, and whatever was out there, whatever was coming for us, would not stop until it had claimed what it wanted. I spoke one last time, my voice barely above a whisper. "Survivors, the night feels darker than ever. Something's coming. Stay hidden. Stay alive. I'll be back, if I can." The transmission crackled, and then just as quickly as it had started, it cut off. The silence was deafening, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't sure if I would make it through the night. The lights were closer now. whatever was out there, whatever was watching us, was waiting for us to make the next move. And I had no idea what that would be. If you found this video interesting or thought-provoking, please like and share it. If you have any feedback or suggestions, leave a comment and let me know what you think. Your support is more important than ever as we continue to bring you daily broadcasts. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new radio broadcast, and I promise you won't want to miss it. Stay safe, stay human, and I'll see you soon.